Uh, Good morning and welcome to this recording this morning of some work that we did of insights with London smokers. I'm delighted to introduce Sonya Dixon, who's the director of Bluegrass, which is a research consultancy that undertook some insights work with London smokers for us that was very well received, and we've recorded it today. We're recording it so that people who weren't able to go there can hear Sonya talk through that for us. So welcome, Sonya. Thanks very much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you for giving me and Bluegrass the opportunity to present this work, which has been fascinating. What I'm going to do is to share my screen. So the work that we did took place at the very end of 2021. So in that context, it was as the pandemic was coming to a close, but was still very much present with us. The work looked specifically at routine and manual smokers in London and wanted to unpick and explore smokers' attitudes to smoking, their behaviour in terms of both smoking and quitting. And there we go, the fieldwork was undertaken in November and early December. We did 12 focus groups and 20 depth interviews. I'll talk a little bit about how they were structured in a second. But as I said, it was about looking at how people feel about smoking, both generally on a population level, but also about their own personal smoking, to try and understand what their motivations were for quitting and what prevents them from both attempting and succeeding in quitting. To look at perceptions and experiences of the range of approaches to quitting, the different quit aids and support services that are available, to understand how they feel about future quit attempts, what it looks like, whether they feel they're able to, and how they might envisage doing that. And we did also test some campaign messaging, which we're not going to cover in this presentation here. So in terms of sampling and the recruitment of the work, as we said, all of our smokers were routine and manual smokers, and we made sure that we had a good spread geographically in the 4 quarters of London. The groups were all held online, which meant that we could bring people together from, they didn't all have to be from one borough, and that worked very well in terms of geography. We also segmented the sample according to how people felt about quitting, whether they had recently had a quit attempt and whether they'd succeeded or not in that, and how they felt about quitting in the future. Most of the people that we spoke to didn't reject ever trying again, so they were open to it, even if they didn't feel they were on the verge of it. And we did a mix of ages of smokers and a mix of how much they actually smoked, so ranging from light, medium and to heavy smokers, just to make sure we got a good mix of profiles there. The 20 depth interviews we did were with BAME smokers, and also with that we looked to try and talk to quite a few Eastern European smokers, and they recruited in the same way. So the headlines of what we found, just in terms of setting the scene, what we saw was smokers talking a lot about the changes over the years and the recent years in how smoking is seen, the regulations that surround smoking. So for slightly older smokers, that was very much about, you know, the smoking ban indoors. And a lot of agreement that those changes very much increased the stigma of being a smoker. And that stigma, people talk about feeling like a social outcast, you know, people treat you like a leper, those sorts of feelings. And they provoke different reactions, from being ashamed of being a smoker and guilty, about smoking on lots of levels, about the health harms you're doing, about the example you're setting your children, all those sorts of things. But also on the flip side of that, defensiveness and justifying it's my only vice, those sorts of things. And a good quote here explaining that, this lady it was said, I think it's a personal choice, it's a social thing. It's something to do and it's relaxing. So if you're relaxed and you're happy, then that's good for you. I think it produces endorphins, which are sort of chemicals produced by the body. So it's relative, isn't it? I think it's a nanny state because they know you must stop or go to vaping or try nicotine patches or God knows what. It's 10 a day. I don't think it's going to kill me. So that's a very self-justifying attitude there from one of the smokers we spoke to. The fact that people know a lot more now about the harms that tobacco does, and the fact that there is a move, lots of trends into healthy eating, veganism, all of the health fads in terms of fitness and health trends, they're not necessarily fads, of course. Those seem to further demonize smoking. It pushes us even further down the unacceptability scale for non-smokers. We talked to smokers about this idea of a smoke-free city, London being a smoke-free city. Younger smokers very much more able to see this as a possibility and something that was appealing. That very much relates to the fact that they feel that they probably won't be smokers by the time they're not young. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But others feel that it's not a realistic proposition. These are often more entrenched smokers, older smokers. But general agreement that it'll become harder and harder to smoke because of regulations. We touched on vaping too, very much seen by smokers as the new addiction. Most smokers have tried it, and lots of talk about the positives, lots of talk about the drawbacks as well. And there remains very much a suspicion about the health effects of vapes. And despite the fact that they know that smoke is not bad for them, they worry about the unproven effects, if you like, of vaping. So why do people smoke? Well, there's lots of reasons people smoke. First of all, very much the habit, the routine of smoking, the fact that it's what people do, it's what I do after a cup of tea, it's what I do with a cup of tea, it's what I do when I'm on the telephone, it's what I do as soon as I finish my meal. Very much a habit, it's what I do when I get in the car, those sorts of things. A lot of talk about the fact that it's linked to coping with stress, with day-to-day anxieties. People very much look at smoking as a way of calming down, a way of diffusing anger, for example, a way just of chilling, if you like. People smoke out of boredom, and very much we saw that there was a good proportion of smokers that we spoke to who said how much more they'd started to smoke during the pandemic because they were just at home, unable to go out and bored. Smoking is something that segments the day, it punctuates time, particularly if people work, they punctuate their day with cigarette breaks. We spoke to beauticians, for example, who say, you know, well, I have one after every client. So it's very much adds some sort of structure and framework to the day. And it delivers sort of contradictory social time. So it's a chance to step into sociability. So whether that's outside the pub, whether that's outside the office, in the smoking shelter, whatever it is people do, and it allows you a common purpose, a commonality between people to share that social time of smoking. At the same time, it gives people the chance to step out of that, to step out of the world, to step out of the stresses, just to leave the kids inside for 5 minutes and go down to the bottom of the garden and have a cigarette and a little bit of me time. So it's rewarding people by just taking them away from the day-to-day hustle and bustle. And then, of course, people smoke because they're addicted and they crave the nicotine and they feel they need a cigarette. Typically, smokers have a very mixed and volatile relationship with smoking. They can love it one minute and hate it the next, and that can change, as I say, from minute to minute, from day to day, over the years and the decades. They can come in and out of that love-hate relationship with smoking. It is very much part of who they are, their identity, their social circle. People have smoking social circles, part of the daily pattern of life. Most smokers that we talk to enjoy it. Many feel they benefit from it. Again, that's often linked to a mental health issue, a de-stressing issue. However, at the same time, all talk about wanting to quit, nearly all talk about wanting to quit, or wishing that they'd never started. And the challenge of quitting is twofold. It's obviously the quitting and getting away from the nicotine cravings and addiction, but also this whole requirement that quitting brings with it of changing your day-to-day life. It's the day-to-day routine, the day-to-day habits, and that's quite daunting and as challenging as the addiction to break. So there's a quote here: the majority of it's the habitual side. In order to break that, you'd have to change your whole routine, your life routine, your daily, everyday routine. You'd have to not have that cup of tea in the morning. You'd find something else to do after your dinner, somewhere to sit on your hands when you're on the phone. I mean, even now I'm talking to you, in my head is saying, I want a cigarette. I don't need a cigarette. I just want one because I'm on the phone. So a very big challenge there to break that day-to-day habit. When we talk about quitting, people talk about health very much as the first thing that people talk about to quit. They know it's not good for them to smoke. They know all of the health harms, or most of the health harms that come with smoking. So they naturally talk about health issues, and that can be something about health issue now, and it can be about trying to be healthier in the future. Linked to that, but not the same thing, is a drive to be more fit. And as well as seeing more people smoke more in the lockdown, we also saw smokers talking about taking the opportunity of being on furlough, for example, to get out and do some walking, to get fitter, and quitting smoking goes hand in hand with that. Cosmetic reasons are slightly linked to that, but it's about perhaps the smell of smoke, not wanting to smell of smoke, people recognizing that your skin's not as good when you smoke, the teeth issue, the staining of your teeth, and those sorts of things all are mentioned when we ask people why they might want to quit. Cost, both financial and the time cost, but increasingly important, obviously, at the moment, the financial implications of smoking. And work we have done since then has just showed how much more important that is becoming for everyone with the cost of living crisis that's going on. And then role modeling and family, also very important. People want to, they don't want their children to smoke. They often hide it from younger children as long as they can. They want to set a good example, and often they have children who see that they smoke, asking them to quit. So that's very important, and it can be children or it could be grandchildren. As we said, in terms of quitting, most want to quit. Many have tried multiple times. They've had mixed successes. We talk to smokers who quit for a year, quit for 5 years, quit for 3 months. We also talk to smokers who quit every Monday. So, a lot of different patterns and successes going on there in the quitting, with quitting attempts. Younger smokers, and we talked to quite a lot of young smokers, don't recognize how hard it can be. They live in this sort of I don't know if it's a world of denial, because maybe they just don't realize, but they talk about when they quit. They feel it'll be easy to do when they come to it, and that's whether it's when they leave college, when they start work, when they move in with someone who doesn't smoking, whether they have a child, when they have a child. There's lots of things that they just assume that they will stop, and they don't realize that by the time they get to that, they'll probably find it very, very difficult. Older smokers regret not quitting in their youth and can be quite fatalistic about it. They feel it's too late. There's some skepticism about support that's available. People don't really know if it's for them. For many, it just doesn't even cross their mind that they might seek support in a quit attempt. They do talk about learning as they go along, so they might move into sort of another quit cycle and think, well, this didn't work for me last time, I'll try something different, or this did work for me and I'll try that again and make some slight changes to it. So it is a learning process, but that's not to say that smokers approach quitting as a sort of a series of attempts. It's always this one attempt, whereas we know that obviously a series of attempts is probably what's going to lead to a successful quit. Cutting down is seen by a lot of people as a route to quitting altogether, and people set themselves targets of 2 fewer cigarettes this time. Then in a couple of weeks' time, I'll smoke two less than that, and on it goes. One of the things we have seen in the pandemic is people moving to rollies, and that makes it a lot more difficult because it's more difficult to keep a track of what you're smoking when you're rolling your own. Whereas if you've got a box of cigarettes, you can see you start the day with 20 and you finish the day with 8 or whatever. So it's more manageable. So that's something that you know, does cloud that issue a little bit. And the reasons that people relapse are stressful issues. There might be slightly, you know, they might be quite minor. You know, might be a fallout with someone and they start again, or major life events, but also social influence. So sort of being in the pub and, you know, all your pals go out for a cigarette. You either sit inside on your own or you go out and you stand with them, but you're not smoking. So that can be obviously really difficult. In anticipation of quitting, there's also barriers in terms of fear of the quitting process and how hard it's going to be and how rubbish you're going to feel in those early days of being quit, and the fear of being quit. And people say, you know, I don't want to spend the rest of my life wanting something I can't have. So there is a fear of being quit as well. They fear being socially excluded and missing out of those, you know, those fun times outside the pub or wherever it is. People worry about weight gain. What are they going to do? Are they going to just eat more? Are they going to drink more? Increased alcohol consumption is an issue as well. Very important to people is this loss of coping mechanisms. So not only, and there's a double whammy, not only will I not be able to have that cigarette to de-stress, but I'll be more stressed because I can't have that cigarette. So very much something that's exacerbated there. So some final thoughts. The big thing is that smokers feel differently about quitting from minute to minute. You know, you do tend to move down the spectrum and then become to be in a place where you want to quit, but the desire is volatile and it's all shades of grey in between I will and I won't. People can very easily talk about their motivations to quit. I want to quit because of my health. I want to quit because of my children. But a lot of the time, ought to is expressed as want to. So they know that they should, but whether they really are wholeheartedly behind that is another question entirely. Everybody has their own drivers, their own strength of will, their own degree of commitment. And these change as people move in and out of different parts of their lives. And it's about having, you know, the capability, the motivation and the opportunity to quit. Those things are all changing all the time, and it's important to understand that about smokers. Most of the quit attempts are made unaided. People don't engage with smoking cessation services as a rule, and there's lots of reasons for that. First of all, they need to be top of mind. They need to know they exist and how they engage with them, and most of the smokers we spoke to don't know those things. They need to understand why they would engage. Why would they go to a support service? So we know that success rates are increased if you get support, but smokers don't tend to know that. They need to understand and be comfortable with whatever the service is going to give them. What is the format of the support? Most aren't clear what they could be, and for every person who says I wouldn't want to be in a group, there's another who says they do want to be part of a group. You know, different things work for different people. But certainly what we saw in this work was the indication of the potential benefit of peer support groups. People saying, you know, if I had someone who understood me, there you go. It's knowing that I had to be somewhere, knowing that I could speak to someone who wasn't judging me. So it's a lot about tone there, but about the peer support as well. So it's very clear that local services need to be promoted so that they know, so smokers know what's on offer, where it's on offer, why they should go there, and how it will work for them. We did talk about messaging in terms of quick campaigns. Shock approach still works for some, but most are kind of like, we've been there, we hear it all the time, we know how bad it is for us. They reject it, and they call for something that's more positive in approach, that helps them to look forward to what it might be like if they were a quit smoker, somebody who didn't smoke anymore, the better things, something that's supportive, encouraging, gives them hope for the future. They want to feel part of a like-minded movement. They love the idea of people going through the same things as them, to be understood, to be inspired, and to be praised. And a final quote here, I think it's the positive affirmations, you know, every day, if you're told well done, every day you need it, like positive stroking, because it is tough. You know, people who don't smoke just don't understand how tough it is. And, you know, all the people that look down your nose at smoker, you know, it's tough. So you need to be told how good you are, and if you don't do it, and you need to be shown how rich you are if you don't do it as well. So that's my final slide.
Sonya, I always enjoy hearing you and hear something different every time. Thank you so much. I've got a few questions. We've also got Wendy Elcombe here from Greenwich, whom many people will know, and I'm just going to ask Wendy if you've got any questions for Sonya, please.
I'm not sure it's a question. I think it's probably like an observation in terms of like all the things that you've shared with us, is that around what we need to do to reach out to smokers. And I think that kind of theme coming through to me in thinking about how we could market and promote our services and support is around the things like creating those opportunities for people to actually, you know, take a chance. And I think we know from the evidence, the more people try and have those quit attempts, the more likely they are eventually to sort of come out and end up smoke free. So I think something like that we're presenting people with those opportunities. So those sort of calendar events, or, you know, individualized, your birthday's coming up, so we direct market through primary care lists and other things like that we know it's key dates or a key birthday. We use things like New Year, October, but maybe we need to create some more calendar events around as well, and link it to other things about positive outcomes. So lots of people like a challenge. It seems to be quite a new phenomenon, and kind of like you said, joining a group of people, like-minded people. So again, increasing interest in environmental issues and veganism, and that's grown a lot, and taking up challenges such as, you know, running and couch to 5K and all that stuff. So I think we need to tap into some of those sort of challenges. Stoptober works quite well with that. But I think, thank you. I think that they were just my thoughts really. So not so much as a question, but really thinking about how we use your insight into shaping some of our work locally and across London in our campaigns, and how we use that really. So thank you.
I think that's really interesting, Wendy. One of the things that, you know, is sadly true is that for one person what works, for the next person it doesn't. So I think, you know, the answer is not a single approach, isn't it? And I think there are certainly people who respond to the special date type approach. And certainly in some of these groups, we had a group of slightly older smokers, and they were talking amongst themselves as part of the group. And one guy said, "Oh, I'm going to be 60 next year, and I am determined to be quit by the time I'm 60." And then the other lady, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be 62, and what a great idea," you know. And so that does work. But on the flip side, that there are people who, you know, the one thing smokers say a lot of is that you've just got to be ready. You've got to be in that mindset, and it doesn't matter if you're 60 every day if you're not in that mindset, sort of thing. And that they feel that things like Stoptober are unrealistic because, you know, I'm not ready on the 1st of October, but you know, so it's just accepting that some things work for some people and some things don't work for others. And I think that I think it's really interesting, this idea of multiple attempts and this path of attempts to quit, and how reassuring that can be for some people. And it says to them, you know, do your best, but you know, it's not the end of the world if you don't succeed this time, because next time, you know, you'll have learned and you'll be further down the line. And again, on the flip side of that, for some people, like, oh, well, if I'm not going to succeed, why would I bother? You know, so it's about trying to find that way of communicating that it might not happen the first time without, you know, disincentivizing, I think, people. So yeah, I think that your comments are very true. And I think that this idea of encouraging people to not put the final full stop if they don't succeed.
Yeah, I know you stratified the groups into different ages. What did you see as time went on across those age groups?
So I think that one of the things that comes out, you know, quite starkly, and it's not 100% at either end, obviously, but typically younger smokers don't necessarily think, well, typically don't think they're going to be smokers for life. They feel, as I said, that you know, they'll give up when, and whatever their little moment is for giving up. As I said, it might be, you know, when I get married, when I want to have children, when I leave university, when I leave college, you know, whatever it is. And they live in a world where they feel that they'll just decide and that's what will happen. You know, I promised my mum I'll be quit by the time I'm 30. Well, you know, this person started smoking at 18. By the time she's 30, that's a long time smoking. So there is this real challenge about getting younger people to recognize, well, not to start in the first place, obviously, but to recognize that it's not going to be that easy to quit, and that it's, you know, do it now before it gets even harder, really. On the other end of the spectrum, older smokers, they're not all a lost cause by any means. As we saw, there was some lovely sort of, I'm going to be 60, you know, good moments, but a lot of people do at that age do tend to think, oh well, you know, I've done the damage is done now, you know, I've smoked so long, how could I possibly not smoke? You know, I am a smoker, I can't see myself as a non-smoker. This visualization of the self as a non-smoker is really challenging for some people. And I think if you can't ever imagine yourself as a non-smoker, then that's a massive barrier to even stepping into a quit attempt, really. And also a lot of older smokers a bit sort of defensive about the fact, when I started smoking, we didn't know it was that bad for us. You know, people were encouraging us to smoke, and you know, there is a bit of that. So that you know, there's sort of naivety at one end of the scale, and then this sort of, you know, resignation and defeatist attitude sometimes at the end. And then in between, life stages can really affect people. I think that a lot of smokers, as they move into parenthood, it's a real opportunity to I mean, obviously with women, the whole pregnancy and quitting is a real opportunity. And you know, sadly, we speak to lots of women who quit like that when they were pregnant, and then took it up like that once they weren't. So, you know, it's really trying to understand how we can get there. But also fathers, this whole idea of you know, a new parent, and all you want is the best for your baby, and you know that smoking isn't the best for them. You know that you don't want them to smoke, but also that you want to be a role model, you want them to see you as the hero, you know, you don't want them to know that you smoke. So real opportunities at that moment, at that life stage. And then every life stage kind of brings with it, you know, we talk to smokers who'd attempted to quit or were going to quit because they were moving in with a partner who was a non-smoker. So lots of triggers that life events will bring, and obviously sort of health life events as well. But yes, the most stark is this sort of naivety versus fatalism, I guess, between the youngest and the oldest smokers.
So Sonya, as always, really interesting. I always hear something different and learn something different every time we have discussions around this. Really appreciated you coming along today, and we look forward to using your expertise further and getting even more detailed understanding of what would be helpful for our smokers. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.